Hey, good morning. It's Dr. Brian McCarley, and we are here this morning with another episode of Doc About Town. And today we have some kind of an interesting thing to do today, which is not a business like we normally do or a local charity, but we have an opportunity to sit down with Janet Leonard, who is a local author and legend. And her book came out, what, 2 years ago, right? You said May of 2022. It's called When the Hart Speaks. And uh, we're just going to kind of dive into that. And tell us a little bit about When the Hart Speaks and your journey to writing that book.
Oh my goodness. Well, in high school, I had a wonderful teacher, Mr. Purvis, and I took his creative writing class and fell in love with writing, never thinking it would go anywhere. And at the age of 48, I started selling cars. And one of the guys came in one day that I was actually terrified of. And he said, he always called me church lady. He said, Church lady, you need to send a column into the Noblesville Ledger. They're actually asking for guest columnists. And I go, I'm not a writer. And he said, I have to sit here and listen to you talk 10 and 12 hours a day. You know how to tell a story. So I sent in my first column, never telling anybody. And they printed it in the Noblesville Ledger. And my friends would call and say, we didn't know you were a writer. And I said, I didn't know I was one either. Yeah. So the editor called, asked for another one that was printed, and she called one day and she said, could you be a weekly columnist for us? And that was 18 years ago.
Wow.
Yes.
That took a quick turn.
Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about it, but that when I added up as a weekly columnist, I'm getting close to 1,000 columns, which they're different every week.
Sure.
And I usually never know what I'm going to write about it until a few days before, and sometimes the day it's due. But when COVID hit, I had to retire, and my husband said, and now you'll write your book. And I got connected with some writers and some writer communities. And it took me about a year, and it came together, found a wonderful company it was a self-publishing company, but they helped me, and it was published 2 years ago. It's in Barnes and Noble. They've had book signings for me. It's of course, on Amazon. And now I'm working on my second book, and I'm working on a third, which will be fiction.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you said the third one's going to be fiction. Tell us about When the Heart Speaks. What's the format? What's
Okay,
the pattern here?
it's kind of a memoir, but it's a lot of my newspaper columns that really got a lot of attention.
Okay.
I speak from my heart, but I guess I make people laugh, I make people cry, but most of all, make them think, because I talk about life. And then when I started writing the book, my parents have a fascinating story. Um, they married at 16 in the hills of Kentucky and tried for years to have a baby, and they couldn't. So they adopted me when they were 30.
Oh gosh.
I was the third baby they were supposed to get. The first one died.
Hmm.
The second one, the mother changed her mind. So literally, I showed up on their doorstep.
Oh wow.
That is a true story.
Wow.
Because their doctor was on the welfare board, and he said, I want Jim and Audrey Hart to get the next baby, but I want you to have that baby in your arms. So they showed up on the doorstep.
How about that? Now they were still in Kentucky.
They were here, and they moved here.
Okay.
This was the promised land. So when they were 18, they moved to Indiana because there was all the factories. So Dad ended up at Firestone.
Okay.
And that's how they ended up here and bought their house on 12th Street. And I live now 3 blocks away from the house I grew up.
How about that?
So I tell my story because the age then of 48, I was a decorator. Let me back up here. I decorated homes with home interiors for 26 years. Went through a divorce and had no retirement or benefits. And the economy had changed things. And I thought, what can I do? Went out to Potter's Bridge, did a lot of praying, said, okay, Lord, and picked up the classifieds, and out fell an ad for Don Hines Ford. And I knew nothing about cars and trucks, and I had never worked with men. And I did. I looked up and I said, Africa would be easier as a missionary, maybe. Yeah. and didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone a lot of things, writing, the whole thing. Went in the next day and did everything I could to convince the sales manager not to hire me. I've never worked with men. I know nothing about cars and trucks. And he goes, "You have 26 years of sales experience, and there's something about you."
Hmm.
So I left there with a job. And when I told my friends, they were like, "We didn't know you knew about cars and trucks." And I go, "I don't. I'm really good about things I know, doing things I know nothing about." So I did that for 16 years and ended up finding my husband in the waiting room 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago now.
Okay.
And Chuck Leonard was the best thing that ever happened to me. We are very different. He was the school superintendent at Hamilton Southeastern for 17 years, and he married the truck lady. So I say we were kind of the Big Bang Theory, old people's version.
Okay.
He's Dr. Leonard, and I'm Janet or Penny the Ditz, truck lady. So all of this is in my book. And then I tell about, taking care of my parents. And I have the story of the red bird because I always know when a red bird shows up, it's a visitor from heaven. And it's very apparent when one shows up that it's supposed to show up for me. So there's a lot of stories in there. Most of the time people say, "I can relate to what you say." And to me, that's the biggest compliment. So now I love writing. And you never know where your journey's going to take you. For 2 years, I've been going to the Taylor University Writers Conference, which is an incredible conference. I've gotten to know the head professor there, and she reads my columns, she follows me, and she's asked me to teach 2 workshops this summer.
Wow.
At the Taylor Writing Conference.
Isn't that amazing, the circuitous route that life takes us when someone encouraged you to write a column and you were like, "What? No." And you did. And then here we go. Now you're teaching at a writer's conference.
Yeah.
Plus working on books number 2 and number 3.
Yes. And just the writing community is so supportive. So I have friends from everywhere that we talk, and we really don't critique each other. We support each other, give each other ideas, inspiration. So I'm 68 years old and I'm having the time of my life.
That's fantastic. So I'm curious. How we talked about this. I never know where the interview is going to go. So I ask questions as they come to my mind. I'm curious about your first column.
Oh,
talk to us about that. What was the topic, and tell us about that column.
My yellow brick road to the car dealership.
Okay. So basically the story you just told us?
Yes. I found out I had a brain, I had a heart, but most of all, I had courage.
How about that?
To walk into a car dealership showroom. I was wearing a black pantsuit. I can remember, trimmed in hot pink. I was the only one in the showroom wearing hot pink. Yeah, so
that must have been the je ne sais quoi that the sales manager was talking about.
Oh, he was fascinated, I think, by my age and being female, and of course all the men in there, they're car guys. The thing is, a lot of people don't realize car guys still have a heart. You just have to look a little deeper or whatever. Sure. But after a few months of proving myself, going out and jumping a battery and driving the big diesel trucks, which I do look funny. It's very hard to climb into some of them. I even learned how to use and describe a scissor hoist on a dump truck to show people how to use a mulch truck or whatever. So I can be really boring to a lot of my girlfriends, but towing capacities, axle ratios, you got to learn your stuff. And I think that's where I gained the respect of a lot of the guys. And then the guy who scared me the most, Jay Snyder, he was brilliant. And he came in my office one day and he said, "I'm going to teach you the car business." And he did. And I've sold to a lot of the contractors, the good old boys, the guys who realized that I knew what I was talking about, which was a little crazy, but God has a sense of humor.
Well, it's quite a learning curve, but you obviously rose to the challenge. I think that's the takeaway from that story.
When I started selling, I would come home and literally have manuals, car and truck manuals. I slept with them, and I would read about the F-150s and then you had to get to the difficult ones where they're F-250s and 350s. And when you changed that you need a single wheels in the back or you need a dually. And I've convinced a lot of the guys that they needed a dually when they would argue with me, and they really found out that I was right.
Isn't that funny? That is so funny, Janet. That cracks me up. That is awesome. So talk to us about the new books.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So what's book number 2 going to
Book
be
number
like? Is it an
2.
extension of book 1 or not really?
It's some columns, but one night I hear voices in the middle of the night. My husband always says, "Did you hear voices last night? You're up at 5 a.m." Yeah, and they get loud, and I just give up. But I heard the words "soft words for hard times" because so many people right now seem to be going through tough stuff. I mean,
Sure.
I don't know if COVID has amplified it, or really don't know what it is, but I thought soft words for hard times. So I've gone through a lot of hard times, things that I would have never imagined. If you had told 18-year-old Janet what she would go through in her life, there's no way. But my faith is very strong. My mom, she was a woman of faith, and she lived her faith. And I think that was a draw for a lot of people because my mom was a kind and caring person. She showed up. And I think that's what we need more and more of, people showing up with kindness. And so through the hard times, I've gained a perspective. I called it vintage wisdom, just a perspective with my faith and the strength that you can gain. I'm a Bible nerd. I read scriptures and I take notes during sermons. Um, but yeah, so I'm working on that about halfway through. A lot of my columns will be in there because I write about my life, the
Sure.
good, the bad, the ugly, the challenging. But then there's a third book. I want to write a fiction book. The thing about a fiction book, you can add a lot of truth. Did that really happen? Maybe,
Sure.
maybe not. But my mom, her name was Audrey, and her one of her 9 sisters was named Grace. So Audrey Grace, this is how it starts out,
Okay.
is a hairdresser in the hills of Kentucky in 1989. And the thing about a hairdresser, she's not a preacher, she's not an attorney, but she holds a lot of secrets. And so Audrey Grace holds a lot of secrets, and she's an amazing woman, an incredible personality. I'm having so much fun creating her personality. But then there's a new preacher that shows up in town. He's not a nice man.
Mm-mm.
He's really not a nice man. And I'm really having fun with him because he turns up missing. Does Audrey Grace know what happened? Maybe. He's now missing for 20 years. It's the year 2009, and it's the night of the prom. And all hell's about to break loose. So I am just like,
you know how to spin a yarn.
Jay Snyder said I could tell a story.
You just roped me in.
But I'm like, oh my goodness, the coffee shops, they all know me well. Rocky, who I'm fascinated with, talk about someone who could tell a story. He came in one day and he goes, "Have you killed the preacher yet?" I said, "I'm not saying he died. I'm saying he's missing." So yeah. So that's the third one. So
Okay. Lots
I'm
of intrigue. I like this. This
That's book by vacation.
yeah, no kidding.
I know everybody keeps saying, "Would you hurry up?"
And so that raises the question then: what are we looking at publication dates yet for 2 and 3?
I want to hopefully be done by the end of the year. What I did not anticipate with these books being published and the book signings and all is all the speaking engagements I've been invited to.
Kind of cuts into your writing time, doesn't it?
It does, because even though yeah, speaking, writing, there's so many words flying. It's like, oh my gosh, speaking to me at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's like, oh, because if you hear voices, people think you're a little delusional. But if you're a writer, you write what the voices say down.
That's right.
And then it's okay. So yes, but the speaking and book clubs, oh my gosh, I love visiting book clubs. The questions that they ask are just, they're fascinating. So, and then church groups, yeah, the speaking has come around that I thought, well, didn't see this come. And of course, I love it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's you clearly do. It's not something that's contrived for you. It just kind of comes out of you. I think that's fantastic. And I think that's missing with a lot of people. That people just miss out on that. They just kind of go through their lives and they miss what you're exuding here. I love that.
I love life. I love the writing. I love my community. I go uptown, I'm on my laptop or whatever, and I greet people, and I'm just fascinated by other people's stories too.
Yeah.
So I'm an eavesdropper. I'm sorry. Now everybody who sees this, I don't repeat everything that I hear, but
You may write about it.
But you write about it.
I have the T-shirt that says that too. Careful what you say. It may
That's
be.
fantastic.
It may be in a column. It may be in a story.
So book 2 is Soft Words for Hard Times. And what's the title of book 3 going to be? Do you know yet? You still working on that?
I'm still working on that.
Okay.
Audrey, I got to discuss that with Audrey Grace, and
Okay.
yeah, it takes place in Sunny Gap, Kentucky, because my mom was raised in. Oh my gosh, yeah, I can't even think. I know Dad was Gap Creek.
Gap Creek.
Sunnybrook and Gap Creek. So
Okay.
it's kind of I get my stories going, and
Sure.
and yes, but yeah, the fun thing is things that have happened, because I don't ever want to have it so that somebody can say, I know who she's talking about.
Gotcha.
So I can just kind of spin a yarn, and we never know where that yarn's going or where it's going to unravel.
How about that? That's fantastic. So you've been in Noblesville your whole life.
My whole life.
Yeah. So you graduated Noblesville High School.
Did in 1974. Just had my 50-year class reunion.
I saw that the pictures on Facebook from the banquet. So that's great.
54 of us still live in Noblesville of the 196 that graduated.
Wow, 25% of you.
I think that's absolutely fascinating for me.
Yeah.
So
I graduated a few years after you did, but there's still quite a few of us still around here. Well, quite a few of us that are still around here, and there's probably even more of us who have left and come back.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me. It's kind of a strange phenomenon. Usually, when you think you leave your hometown and you just travel the world, do your own thing, but there's a lot of my class and the classes around me that have done that, though. Noblesville is just a tough place to be. It's just really a great place to live.
I call it the real hallmark place.
Sure.
So many times I'm downtown and I'm like, especially I talk with other writers. I said, no, I live in a hallmark town. I live in a community. It's not just, the beautiful parks in our downtown. It's got character, but the people are genuine people with hearts.
Yeah.
And they love their community, and the merchants and the cafes. It doesn't get any better. So it gets a little crazy.
Sure.
I know, the traffic.
Yeah. But that's been 40 plus years.
Yeah.
It's been here as long as I've lived here. It's always going to be that way, I think, with traffic in Noblesville.
Yeah.
It just is.
You've got to dwell on the positive.
Sure.
And you've got to realize how blessed we are. Mm-hmm. And the community and the teachers and the educational system. And people care here.
That's awesome.
So I'm not going anywhere.
Talk to me a little bit more about Mr. Purvis, because I too had Mr. Purvis in high school. I didn't take creative writing with him, but I had him for 3 different classes.
Well, he followed our class from the junior high to the high school.
Oh, he did.
So we started in 7th grade with him. And he asked questions that made us think. And he gave us, I'll never forget the folder that we kept that had words that weren't our normal words. And we had to use it in a sentence, and actually cut out of magazines back in the old day a description that would picture that word. And I became fascinated with those words. And then he had us read, Huckleberry Finn, To Kill a Mockingbird. He was big on Mark Twain.
Oh, yeah.
And he just created for so many of us the desire to read and the desire to write. We have 4 authors in our class of 196.
Oh, wow.
One of them being Susan Crandall, who is a top bestseller, whose book, Whistling Past the Graveyard, is being made into a movie, which I think is so exciting.
Well, they have to film it here.
She sold the rights, and we shall see. But I'm going to be on that red carpet going, that's my friend.
That would be great. That would be really cool.
But Mr. Purvis was one of those teachers that he made the class come alive, and you wanted to learn, and you wanted to be in his class. So I found him a few years ago. I had written about him in a column, and a friend sent the column to him. I didn't know where he was, and he contacted me. And I can remember this is how crazy it was. We were watching an award show on TV, and I opened up my laptop and I go, oh, Chuck, Mr. Purvis found me. Oh my gosh. And he said, I always knew you had a creative mind and that you could write.
How about that?
So anyway, found him, was writing the book, and I contacted him, and he wrote the foreword to my book. And I got that foreword, and of course the tears came because it was such a compliment, but he was also one of my editors. So it was like being back in the 7th and 8th grade with the red marks, and I would change this, or what about this? And then at the top, just like he did in 7th, 8th, all through high school, he wrote remarks, which is what really he had a way of critiquing, not being criticized, not being critical.
Sure.
So that's a lot. I have a lot of Mr. Purvis stories, but being able now to go visit him and his wife, yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
Well, hopefully he'll get to see this interview. It would be great.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
That would be fun for him.
I remember first day of class, the first class we had with him, he had us, and I don't remember all the details. It's been 35 years ago. The details are kind of lost, but he had us sit up in our desks and put our hands on our heads and sit there. And I remember him saying something like, "Okay, now do you know what you are?" And nobody, we're like, "No, what?" He's like, "You're all broccoli. And that's the last time you get to be a vegetable in my class."
Oh,
and that was the first time I thought, this guy's crazy.
Oh,
but he was right. I mean, he kept us engaged, and I still love Mark Twain to this day. I had him for Twain, and what a great teacher he was. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed
and he has
Purvis.
written a couple of books, which I find fascinating.
How about
to
that?
read his story. It's like, wow. I mean, yeah, he has quite the story. Just a very fascinating man.
That's awesome. I had no idea. Well, that's great. Well, I really appreciate you taking this time with us this morning. This has been so much fun. I think we always have fun on our interviews, but I think this has been I think I've laughed more on this one than I have on any others. Just the stories, though. It just makes up life, right? So
it makes up life.
So, Janet, thank you for taking the time to sit down with us this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Brian.
Hey, and if you want to find out more, be sure and check her book out, When the Hart Speaks, and it's spelled Hart. It's her maiden name. Mm-hmm. When the Hart Speaks, and on Amazon, or where else can they find it?
Barnes & Noble.
Okay. And keep an eye out for her new books to be coming out, hopefully very soon. Can't wait.
Thank you so much.
As always, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, the Noblesville Elks Lodge, number 576, and Genesis Family Chiropractic for making this show possible and helping us to get it out to as many people as possible. And if you would like to be featured on an interview, or you know somebody who would like to be featured, reach out to us. We'd love to get you scheduled and find a time to sit down and have a conversation. Have a great day.